day, you're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Danie, Laurel.
And I'm Delos Santos. Here are today's top stories. 3 major railway projects have hit a roadblock after the government scraps its loan deal with China. The Transportation Department now looks at alternative financing options for the projects. Foreign banks expect the Bangko Sentral to deliver more rate hikes to tame inflation and to support the weakening peso. Motorists are expected to benefit from another round of rollback in oil prices this week, and the Energy Department says the decrease in pump prices could continue next week.
And Elon Musk's SpaceX successfully launches a cargo mission to the International Space Station.
We begin our broadcast with foreign banks expecting the Bangko Sentral to deliver more rate hikes after it unexpectedly raised rates by 75 basis points last week. Japanese investment bank Nomura says the Bangko Sentral remains clearly hawkish following the off-cycle increase, which brought the policy rate to 3.25%. Taking this into account, Nomura says it has revised its key rate forecast to 4.5% from its initial projection of 3.75% for this year. Nomura expects domestic inflation to rise further above the Bangko Sentral's 2 to 4% target and to peak by October. Meanwhile, Deutsche Bank says the Bangko Sentral may raise rates by another 50 basis points in August. Deutsche Bank says it will take more than the off-cycle move to stabilize the peso, which recently touched an all-time low.
Now, the Transport Department says President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is now eyeing both foreign and private sector support for railway projects. The Marcos administration now faces challenges in securing funding for the 3 major rail projects. That's after the government canceled its applications for loans from China. These are the Calamba, Bicol, Clark-Subic, and Mindanao railway projects. Now, former Finance Secretary Sonny Dominguez said that China Exim Bank wanted around 3% interest rate for the loans, but the government deemed the applications canceled after Beijing failed to respond to their application that was pending since 2019. Now, Marcos Jr. has also directed the DOTR to go back to the negotiation table to secure loan agreements for those 3 railway projects.
Dahil walang sagot, withdrawn. So ang utos ng Presidente, reopen the negotiation. At gusto nating malaman ng tao, walang pondo para sa Calamba to Bicol. Kung ano yung 142 billion na pinag-usapan doon, walang pondo yan. Yung Clark to Subic, walang pondo yan. Yung Tagum Davao Digos, 100 kilometers, walang pondo yan.
Now, in response to the issue, China says it is open to talks on government projects and infrastructure. In a statement, the Chinese embassy says Beijing will tap its own advantage and support the Philippines to improve its infrastructure. The embassy said 17 projects in total have been completed and more than 20 projects are in progress. And despite the challenges brought by the pandemic, China pointed out that the 2 nations have worked tirelessly to push the projects forward. A week from now, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. will be delivering his first State of the Nation address. Let's find out what is on the wish list here from foreign investors. Our guest this morning, Chris Nelson, Executive Director and Trustee of the British Chamber of Commerce, Philippines. Chris, good morning.
Good morning.
Well,
I
don't know what time it is there in Portugal, but thank you for joining us today. Again, Chris, off camera earlier, we were talking about how there are so much more concerns other than COVID here. For one, we're tackling inflation here in the country, in particular, elevated levels here. How is that affecting the appetite here from British investors? And does that in any way offset potential interest after a few economic legislations were made in the last administration?
Yeah, look, I think the British investors are very much encouraged by, obviously, the round of legislation was passed towards the end, obviously, of the Duterte administration. We were very keen advocates for that. We'd like to see that further continuing. I think British investors are also looking to see it, and they're hoping, and that's been one of the pronouncements from the new Secretary of Department of Trade and Investment, obviously Secretary Pasquale, that one of the priorities is going to be the ratification of RCEP. We consider that to be a very important development. And the reason for that is, and it's one of the key points, we see the Philippines not only as an important market for investors and doing business, but also as a gateway to Southeast Asia. So we're looking to see the continuing further liberalization of the economy, and obviously hoping to see within one of the points being mentioned is that ratification, and obviously the Senate will do that very quickly once they obviously resume, I think, which is on the 25th of July after the SONA.
Okay, Chris, how confident are you that that might actually happen here? Because, we do have several legislators saying that, sure, we do want to be part of RCEP, but now is not the time, especially since the competitiveness of the Philippines, we haven't recovered to such a level where we could be competing with what they call the elephants, like China or other countries.
Well, I think the case is that there's great opportunities. And if you look at RCEP and that program, Diane, I think the only three countries remaining to ratify, if I'm correct, is the Philippines, Indonesia, which I think is progressing, and possibly Myanmar. So I think when we have to look at these things is the opportunities is now. And countries have signed up. And let's not forget, the Philippines can compete. I think there are areas that we can compete in very well. And I think what we're looking at here is really a signal. And I think it's very good that Secretary Pasquale, I think also NEDA has made the point that they wish it to be ratified as well. So definitely there's an urgency there. And I think this is the time. Yes, we need to help and improve and work, and obviously on agriculture, but at the same time, I think the opportunities to be taken is now at this moment.
Okay, again, Chris, like what you mentioned, much of the contention here regarding RCEP zeroes in on the agricultural sector. A number of producers, of course, contesting our potential membership to RCEP. What do you think is going to be the challenge here for President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., considering especially that he appointed himself as Agriculture Secretary, and how big of a task is it for him to ensure food security, considering the times that we are in at the moment?
Look, I think it's very interesting, obviously very important that President Marcos has obviously assumed for now the role of agriculture, and obviously he clearly sees that as an important focus. And I think it is important. Obviously inflation is a factor, and obviously food supply. I think he's also mentioned the need to keep obviously imports to obviously help in terms of that inflation. And in that note, let me just add the role of British companies. We had a meat mission in May, and I would just like to say that obviously British pork, for example, is already up over 46% in terms of exports to the Philippines for the first 4 months. And I think these things will help also to bring down the inflation. But I think also in contrasting with agriculture, it's the continuing need, which has been highlighted, to continue to do the investment and see the economy grow. Now, obviously, they've tapered down the growth rates from previous figures, but it's still to get back to those pre-pandemic levels. So, one, I would just summarize, yes, food security, but I think also he's highlighted, and obviously British companies are there to assist in terms of certainly on the supply of British beef and pork. And I think there's an opportunity to continue further investments, particularly in the digital economy, and improve the infrastructure and make the Philippines continue to be robust.
Apart from RCEP, how has the ease of doing business improved since you've been looking at the investment climate, and particularly during the pandemic? Tell us, we did just report the roadblocks being faced by those deals with China in key infrastructure projects. Is this worrying for European or British investors at the moment?
No, I'd say, look, it's a very good question. At the point, I think ease of doing business is one of the laws that was brought in. Again, that's been highlighted by Secretary Pasquale as one of his priorities. We did see an improvement, but we can see further improvements in that area. Don't forget, a lot of times we're dealing with small to medium-sized enterprises, and that's one of their key considerations. Which is why we always drive and look to get a very good Filipino partner, right, to obviously assist in that. I think that European and British investors are very much heartened by the passage of things like the Public Services Act, the Retail Trade Liberalization, the Foreign Investment Act. Now, we've obviously seen the implementing rules of the Retail Trade Act. We're looking to follow up on the others. And that will be also part of how we see the ease of doing business. I think there is a lot of interest still in the Philippines. I think what we need to continue to do is highlight those opportunities. And as I said before, we're always trying to say to people, look at the opportunities. And obviously, we haven't talked about the clear talents of the Philippines, right, in terms of its human talent and how that's very much appreciated. But also, we want to make companies come here and look at the Philippines as a base and further project into Southeast Asia.
Now, Chris, earlier you were mentioning about the need to boost the digital economy and the digital infrastructure. How optimistic are you about this potential that Southeast Asian nations could actually link their digital systems here, and how do you think might that improve the investment climate here in the Philippines?
Yeah, look, we're very optimistic. I think the pandemic has shown, as it's shown in many countries, but highlighted for the Philippines, is that the digital economy has been a great boom. I mean, we've seen that on e-commerce. We're pleased to obviously have some of them as members of our chamber, and we can see that continuing to grow. And also, we expect that's going to happen in terms of documentation, in terms of dealing with administration, because obviously, you know, you can see it now. If you can have a digital signature and you can roll these things out, it's going to vastly improve. Now, can there be links within Southeast Asia? Yes, of course. And I think, and just come back to RCEP, let's not forget RCEP is going to be one of the, if not the largest trading area of anyone. It's going to contain about 30%, if I'm not, of the total world's GDP. So, yes, and I think these are areas that we've got to look at, along with, of course, we fully appreciate there is economic challenges for the new administration, but it's good to see them setting that out. And we appreciate the priorities that have been highlighted by, of course, Secretary of Finance, by DTI, by NEDA, and all the various departments. I think it's a very encouraging start.
All right, so let's not wait and sit in the sidelines when it comes to RCEP. A clear push for that. Thank you so much. That was, of course, Chris Nelson, Executive Director and Trustee of the British Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines.
Thank you very much, and wishing everybody a good day, and good day to your viewers.
And now let's pause for a quick break, but coming right up. Oil companies are set to implement another round of rollback this week. We'll tell you by how much when Businessworld Live returns. Stay with us. And you're still watching Businessworld Live here in One News. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danie, Laurel.
Now, another round of oil price rollbacks is expected to take effect tomorrow. Uni Oil projects that gasoline prices would go down by up to 4 pesos and 80 centavos per liter, while prices of diesel could be slashed by as much as 2 pesos and 10 centavos per liter. Oil Industry Management Bureau Director Rino Abad says the rollback is a continuing effect of the intermittent lockdown in China and the ongoing interest rate hikes in the U.S.
Possibly, another round could be expected as pronounced by U.S. There will be a policy rate review by July 26, 27. And after that, there is another round of interest hike. We could probably expect rollbacks to continue even after next week.
The national government paid 57 billion pesos to service its debt in May. That's an increase of almost 52% from last year, with both interest and amortization components rising. The Treasury said around 59% of debt repayment serviced interest in May, while the rest went to amortization.
And sugar producers says there is no shortage of the commodity and rising prices should be blamed on manipulation and hoarding. The United Sugar Producers Federation blamed the manipulation on some traders that they did not identify. The group's president, Manuel Lamata, admits, however, that although there are no supply issues for now, a possible shortage can be expected by next month. This is why the industry group is calling on the Sugar Regulatory Administration to import at least 100,000 metric tons of sugar.
An industry group says goods that are not subject to price controls are becoming more expensive. Philippine Amalgamated Supermarkets Association President Stephen Kua said prices continue to surge for grocery items not monitored by the DTI. These products include those that are imported, repacked or recanned but manufactured abroad, such as bread spreads and luncheon meat. Kua said the increases range from 5 to 10% for local goods and 12 to 25% for imported items during the last few months. This price surge is attributed to the higher import costs.
And Elon Musk's SpaceX has launched a resupply mission to the International Space Station. The robotic SpaceX cargo Dragon capsule lifted off from a rocket from NASA's Kennedy Space Center over in Florida.
And liftoff. Liftoff of SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket, launching Dragon on the 25th mission to resupply the International Space Station with cool science.
Followed by stage separation, first stage flip, second stage engine start, and then boost back burn start.
Miko. Stage separation confirmed.
All eyes are on interest rate decisions this week as recession fears continue to gain traction. A look at the week ahead, courtesy of Bloomberg.
Markets will find out if central banks from the Eurozone to Japan can resist the global push for aggressive monetary tightening. Most economists see the ECB limiting its first rate hike in more than a decade to a mere quarter point. That decision will come just hours after the Bank of Japan and Bank Indonesia are predicted to keep policies unchanged. Meanwhile, in China, banks are expected to hold lending rates this week as the economy deals with a slower than expected recovery from COVID lockdowns. And on the earnings front, Goldman Sachs and Bank of America due to report before the opening bell on Monday in New York, Heidi.
And Sherry, tech earnings also in focus. Investors will be closely watching subscriber guidance out of Netflix as well as any commentary on its ad and monetization plans. Meanwhile, Tesla and Twitter report amid the fallout over Elon Musk's abandoned takeover bid. Twitter has said that it will not host an earnings call due to the legal matters surrounding the deal. That's your week ahead.
And those are the biggest stories on the economic and corporate front today. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danie Laurel. We are One News, all sides, all the time. But don't go away. We'll give you the latest on the local bourse when Business World Live returns. Stay with us.
Let's get right to the market. Dan, opening the trading week with even more jitters, but also possibly a little bit of a reprieve compared to last week. Tell us more.
All right, Jess, well, straight to the terminal here. You can see on your screens here the U.S. markets ending on a high note last week. But then again, traders are watching China's weakness and, of course, the U.S. dollar strength. Last week, if you take a look at how we've been doing, we were down already by 2.62% last week, week on week, and that weakness continues this trading morning as we are down by 1.25% in just the past 3 trading days, and this morning down by 0.3%. So continuing that slide, there are analysts saying that we might be pushing the 6,000 levels yet again. RCBC's Mike report says that was on the back of the surprise rate hike last week of the Bangko Sentral, which could lead to higher financing costs for businesses this week. And this, according to AP Securities, for the early part of this week, the local bourse may take a breather before we continue on a downtrend. So let's see how our markets will be faring this week. Just quick peek at the biggest movers. You can see Ayala Land up by 3 8/10% together with Ayala Corp, Emperador as well, which just listed on the Singapore Stock Exchange last week. Still one of our best performers, but on the downside, you do have BDO trailing the rest of the bourse down by 1 7/10%. Now this, of course, on the back of Asian currencies really weakening. You can see the spot returns everywhere from Hong Kong to Japan in the red. The Philippines quite at the bottom of the rung. We are down by a hefty 9.6% year to date. At the bottom part of the group of currencies here. Now, what is happening? The dollar is strengthening because there's risk aversion rather than growth, and that's not a good mix for Asian assets. That's according to BNP Paribas Asset Management. And if you take a look, of course, at the foreign selling, we've actually lost collectively, this of course is a chart in the Philippines, but collectively $71 billion in Asian stocks, emerging Asian stocks out of China already this year. That's double the outflows in 2021, Jess. And finally, just a very quick peek on how our utility is doing, this on the back of Prime Unit, which is Prime Infra Holdings of Enrique Razon, just got the original proponent status for the Meralco project. That will be 500 megawatts of power, and it is still subject to a competitive challenge. Meanwhile, of course, Prime Infra not yet listed, but possibly looking at an IPO if you hear some sources there. Meralco, meanwhile, down by 0.9%, trading at 359 pesos and 60 centavos, Jess.
And that's it for today, July 18, 2022. Join us again tomorrow at exactly 9:30 a.m. You can also catch us on Signal Play. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Jess Delos Santos.
And I'm Danie Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. We are One News, all sides, all the time.